to apply for this money if they either lost a loved one or they themselves were severely injured. We will have an update right before July 1st for the legislature of the total number of people that qualify. Whatever resources that aren't necessary from that $65 million, perhaps it'll be only 2/3 of that resource that's necessary. The other monies will go back to the general fund per our agreement and per what's right. I would say this, a lot of people are catching on that this is a way to begin to move forward, but whatever people choose to do with the One Ohana settlement, they should do. I'm speaking personally to nephews and nieces and husbands who lost loved ones, and they're healing, but the loss was great, and so we're going to try to help them. So that's what we're doing there. Next slide, please. Just a quick bit of Maui recovery, because this is what the resources are going to specifically. At the outset, within hours after the fire, we had to move everyone into shelter, and that shelter was, of course, everyone together, the congregate shelter. But within 13 days, we moved all of the individuals that needed housing, that they couldn't find a place with their loved ones at a home, a nephew, a niece's house, or whatever, moved them into hotels, and then trying hard and harder every day to get them into better settings, longer-term settings, eventually into their own homes. So 13,000 people were displaced at first. 8,000 ended up in hotel rooms. As of this moment, 78% of those individuals have been able to get back into some semblance of more normal life, into a condo, into a rental that we have, and so on. So that number is now down to 1,743 people, down from 7,796. And we hope over the course of the next 30 to 60 days, everyone is in a long-term accommodation so that we don't have any hotel costs, which are admittedly expensive. It was the only option we basically had. It was challenging, okay? We can debate that, but the point was make sure people were cared for so that they didn't harm themselves, so they didn't have extra devastation. So that's been a lot of progress in the last several months. We also moved some of our first family members into houses. You saw that a couple days ago. Keao Maluhia is a 50-unit housing project that the county's doing with CNHA. It's pretty extraordinary. Monies are coming from Hawaii Community Foundation and others. We are doing 450 units. Mahalos to the legislature for funding this. It's called Kalaeola, and we will build more as necessary. That project cost $115 million. We're racing forward under the emergency proclamation from the wildfire. It will happen in just a couple months. So we are already graded for the ground. The infrastructure is going in. That will be 450 houses so that people can definitely move out of hotels and into transitional homes, which are very nice 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes. They're modular homes, but they have a sense of permanency to them. And we spent, we appropriated $115 million, but then because so much money was raised from Hawaii Community Foundation through MICA and really thousands and thousands of people, 250,000 global donors supported that, they were able to give us $40 million right off the bat. So that dropped our project cost from $115 million to $75 million, which is good. And we're going to continue to get additional support when we can, where we can, from the federal government and others. So we're reducing the cost. Also, one of the things that was very clear was that when there were cost escalators, because we had debates with FEMA about what they would pay for, we fought to get them to pay for more. So part of this process was, for instance, getting the COFA migrants covered. And fortunately, that got approved. That saves us tens of millions of dollars. There was a time when they weren't going to pay for some condominiums. Didn't have another option. So the feds are covering that too, and so on and so forth. So that's what that is meant to do. Another small caveat on housing, a bill that I'm very, very happy about, and we're going to get to sign that tomorrow, I believe, Angus, is Senate Bill 2919, empowers the county to enforce or crack down on short-term rentals, the illegal short-term rentals. Why is that important? Because if those short-term rentals become long-term rentals, people can then afford them, because there has been a very serious challenge with escalating prices because the feds are paying quite a lot. We have to normalize the housing market. That will go a long way. And we're going to rely on the county to pass the specific legislation to do that. They have already teed up bills. This is kind of lightning speed for some of this policy change. So again, mahalo to the legislature. Next slide. Here's a quick breakdown on the management of costs, and you'll get more details, I'm sure, from our chairs. The expected state costs for the fiscal year were $472 million, some of which will definitely be reimbursed. For example, contracts for tidal basin, contracts for DHS contracts that the feds agree to pay, contracts for wraparound services. A lot of the Red Cross services get reimbursed. Not for people that were in the immediate moment ineligible, though. For the eligible costs, if someone was fully a citizen in the district, they will cover the cost for a long time. So we will get some of this money back. We peg it at least, the minimum will be $66 million. Beyond that, we have already HCF, Hawaii Community Foundation, and HHFDC contributions. That's the housing, $40 million from HCF, $10 million from HHFDC that they had budgeted already. We had already major disaster fund appropriations, some of which came because the legislature had given us latitude in the last year. When we finished the session, we had monies there. And then finally, this large appropriation and appropriations, which are going to come from the budget. So this is how it breaks out, and we can give you even more detail. Suffice it to say, though, the legislature was able to do these appropriations without taking away from major initiatives, and that's good news. We're glad for that, because we don't want to lose our focus on housing statewide. We don't want to lose our focus on homelessness or healthcare or our Department of Education. So that was an excellent job. Next slide. A couple long-term recovery benefits from this bill. I mentioned earlier already that we have families moving into Keao Maluhia, but also we've done other things. We've got sensors that are going in. Many of these have been donated. Those sensors will give us added alerts for future potential fires. The offices of resiliency put in other things. There are weather monitors that we can put strategically across West Maui and all across our state. They're very inexpensive, and they can help us predict when we have red flag warnings what we really need to do. Legislature helped us buy 175 units at what's called the Hagai Institute, Hale'olaie. Now that's 175 units. They're kind of somewhere between dorms and one bedrooms, so they will also help us decompress some of the folks that are staying in hotels. But most people want to live in West Maui, in fairness, but it might suit others to go there. Again, it's another flexible option for us. We've coordinated a great deal of additional housing, as I mentioned earlier. FEMA is also building 169 units, and we're going to continue to impress upon them that we want that number to be 1,000 units. We have some other ideas on how we could get there. We'll talk about that in future press conferences. And then we will have HUD monies coming in, Housing and Urban Development. Those block grants are going to exceed $1 billion, but it's going to take some time. And that will be a partnership between the county and state. That's going to be a very big deal because that will be the larger money that we get to rebuild in the way that Maui decides. That's going to be the important part. So that money will come in the subsequent months. So I think at this point, I've probably shared enough, but I will just end by saying again, mahalo to the executive branch for seeing us through this with our team. It was absolutely the most incredible challenge that we could have imagined, and our hearts are always broken to know what we've lost. But you can see already what we are gaining, which is more solidarity. We are gaining new abilities to manage the short-term rental market. We are already moving on some of the cultural goals that we had before, like the cultural corridor. We're beginning to talk about that, and we believe this will bring us closer together. But our first and foremost goal was to take care of people, and that's what this bill does, this emergency appropriation. Aloha.
Mahalo, Governor Green. Now, please welcome Senator Donovan De La Cruz.
Thank you. I'm just going to be really brief. I want to thank the governor for being expeditious in signing the bill. This bill is going to make a huge impact for the lives of Lahaina residents and Maui residents. But I really want to thank the members, the Maui delegation. They worked really hard. Members of the legislature put a lot of time and effort in understanding every detail that the governor already mentioned. I mean, they went through different aspects of housing, of culture, of environmental protections to make sure that we could get the bill right and that to make sure that it could really make an impact. But I really want to thank the finance chair because working with the finance chair, we were able to put together a solid financial plan, which allowed us to pass this bill with the monies that we could make sure it was going to be able to make a difference. Without his effort and his team and the Ways and Means staff, I don't think we could put together a solid financial plan that really allowed this so that this bill could be signed today. So kudos to finance and members of the legislature. Thank you.
Mahalo, Senator De La Cruz. Speaking of finance, next, please welcome Representative Kyle Yamashita.
Aloha, everyone. I think the Governor said most of what I wanted to bring up, and I also want to thank WAM Chair and the Maui delegation for their input throughout this whole process. This has been as somebody from Maui, this has been very devastating to all of us, but at the same time, it was heartwarming to see that the legislature, the leadership, and everybody not from Maui was willing to allow this to be a priority. And I want to thank the legislature and the governor, of course, and everybody that kind of put everything together. So on behalf of myself, my colleagues from Maui, thank you so much. And we'll be open for questions later. Thank you.
Mahalo, Representative Yamashita. We will now take questions from the media. You can go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll call upon you. Daryl Huff, Hawaii. He's looking around. Daryl Huff, Hawaii News Now.
Can someone explain, this might be for the lawmakers, I'm not sure
Okay.
who would be appropriate, but the mayor of Maui requested $125 million, I believe, some bonds, some cash. Repeated his request later in the session, but basically didn't get anything significant. And I'm wondering why that was, why you folks think that Maui can afford to take that kind of a financial hit.
I'm going to defer. Okay, Representative Yamashita.
So, well, first of all, all funds included, there's about $1 billion that is going to Maui for all this whole purpose. So that's number one. So there are resources going there. Maui County had very specific things that they wanted. I think we identified what we thought we could do immediately to help them. A lot of that was infrastructure and different things that I think we thought that were FEMA reimbursable that we could do immediately. Now, and this is just my analysis of the current situation. I believe that Maui County has resources to be able to take care of what they need right now. I've said this to them, and I've said it to some of my colleagues. My concern is that usually property tax lags when there is a disaster because it's based upon 2 years ago when revenues or the economy was doing well, so revenues are high. So my thing has been that I think they will need more help from us in the out years. And so I would rather them work within their means currently, and we help them when they need it. And I think that it's going to get tighter for them in the future. And that's just my take.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things. Thank you. Sure. So there are a couple of things. Remember, in about 2 days, we'll start describing the full budget for the next fiscal year as well. And there's, as Chair was just saying, we're approaching $1 billion in appropriations. So there's that. Also, a lot of the projects, for instance, the housing project, the large housing project, we're going to bear the cost of just because it worked better. This was a piece of state land. We have a lot of extra staff to work there and so on. But we work hand in hand. So at the end of the day, the state and our taxpayers are, leaning in because we care about people and we're going to help everyone. But we will have, of course, always a partnership in 3 parts. It'll be federal government, state government, and the county. And truth be told, we couldn't have done much of what we have to do without the support of FEMA and their dollars because they came in pretty quickly. But this is a very large appropriation, and I will reiterate what I said before. One of the things we made sure we did was we told people from around the planet, keep coming to Hawaii in general, because this is part of a crisis, but we also welcome you to help us heal and recover. And so we have not seen a significant dip in our economic capacity. So that's been good. Of course, West Maui was devastated, and we're all going to help one another. There's also going to be a very big economic boom. I was talking with the speaker sometime either this morning or yesterday when the construction begins. There's going to be well over $1 billion of construction, which is going to be jobs for everyone there, plus some. In fact, we're going to have to really work hard to find enough people to help us rebuild. And that's going to be important. That's going to drive a lot of the recovery also. But we'll talk about the broader budget, I think, in subsequent talk stories or in subsequent briefings.
Mahalo. We'll go here. Can you remind me name and news outlet?
Ashley, Hawaii Public Radio. Can you talk about, regarding FEMA reimbursement, what are some of the outstanding negotiations going on between eligible and ineligible costs?
Yes. So that's a great question. So the question was, what's reimbursable and what's not from FEMA? At one point, we were told that as many as 850 individuals were not going to be at all reimbursable that were still in the hotels. That number dropped subsequently to about 500 and then 330, and we now believe it's just 145 individuals, mostly because people have been getting approved and there was that large change with people from the Compact Free Association states. We also are pushing very hard to demonstrate who was or wasn't able to get back to their home, and that was a lot of people, even if it wasn't full loss of their home. Some roads were closed. There was obviously a lot of collateral damage from smoke, and very difficult for people who had to leave the state even for a short time because there weren't other opportunities for them. So all those individuals are also getting approved. We think the number is now closer to 135 that remain ineligible, and we're helping in other ways. That's why we're building houses and we're acquiring places like Hagai. And of course, there's also been a lot of generosity. People have stepped up and taken people into their homes. And the mayor's program, it's basically a stay-home program where they compensate people $500 per individual per month, can stay. And that's where some of the philanthropic monies have gone to. There are other large appropriations that will be reimbursable. For instance, the debris clearance. The debris clearance is going to be about a $1.2 billion project once it's all done. But we hope and expect that the feds will pay for 100% of that because they're going quickly. They've already actually cleared more than 60% of the residential properties, and they'll be returning those quite quickly once the EPA signs off with the Department of Health. 20% plus have already been fully returned to residents in Lahaina. But as a lot more people get to their properties and get to rebuild, it's another way, of course, that they can heal. There were 561 families that both owned and lived in their properties. There are a lot of renters otherwise.
Thank you, Ashley. Name and news outlet, please.
Marcel Honore with Civil Beat. Governor, this is a question that it might apply to, I feel like this could apply to either one, so if you want me to push it, I can, but I'm curious how well you think the legislature responded to the wildfire threat as that come to more and more in focus in the aftermath of Lahaina, and especially given the increased risk for significant wildfire, for those wildfires to occur in the coming months.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about, which is deeply embedded in these appropriations, are more supplies, more firefighting dollars, more equipment, more road breaks, fire breaks. That is excellent. So the legislature did a great job with all of that. And this was, of course, their first opportunity. This was the first session we had. So that has been exceptional, and so we will have more than enough resources. The place that we're going to continue to work is on future response to fires. My feeling, and we're working through some of these details, is we would be wise to have a plan that gives us additional insurance capacity going forward for other disasters. And as everyone knows, this isn't a secret, I'm of the opinion we should have some kind of climate impact fee because this was a climate event. It's just a complicated piece of legislation to get passed. So I will talk about that in the coming hour, about how we're just going to do some prep work to give other opportunities and options to the legislature. We do have to ultimately reconcile a lot of these lawsuits and how that goes. needless to say, attorneys are going to work in that field on this. I would like us to be prepared against future natural disasters, and so I'm going to continue to push for a disaster relief fund that's insurance-based. But we do have good savings. The legislature was very smart. We have $1.5 billion in rainy day funds still there. Gave us $500 million, actually $1 billion, but $500 million we put in. So we are set for a big disaster. It was just very good that they didn't have to tap that, and we're able to work out the money now because everyone's going to have vulnerability going forward.
One more question, name and news organization.
Andrew Gomes, Star Advertiser. I guess for the governor, regarding the wildfire appropriations for the fiscal year that starts July 1, I know in past weeks and months that involved a lot of guessing and estimates. How comfortable are you with the amount appropriated for that, and how kind of shaky or solid is it?
They did a great job. In fact, the one person that I haven't gotten to thank yet is Louis Oliveira. Louis worked very closely with the WAM and Fin chairs to make sure that we had our best approximation of cost. One of the challenges, and this is not an excuse, one of the challenges is we don't get the bills for a long time. And also, as we know, some of the goalposts do get moved from time to time on what a state is responsible for versus a federal government. So that has made it somewhat challenging. So you every month have to try to determine whether the feds will pay 100% or 90%. And these are some big numbers. For example, the debris cleanup, if it ends up at $1.2 billion, and if they didn't cover 100%, we would have to find $120 million. Now, I'm very confident that they are going to cover all of that because they're going to meet the deadlines, and we have a guaranteed lockout period for 100% coverage. So that's why we're really pushing hard. But the ledge gave a lot of resource, and this is an important thing to say. The legislature had to balance the needs of the entire state and, of course, the critical acute needs of Lahaina. So that is the toughest balance to strike when people have lost so much, but people were already struggling all across the state. What's extraordinary about this moment in time is the legislature, and we'll talk a lot about this in the coming weeks, the legislature found a way to pass a historic tax break for ALICE families across the state. We are looking at a tax break for people who are living paycheck to paycheck of well over $5 billion over the next 7 or 8 years. This was the commitment that we all made on affordability. It's brought in gradually, which was the smart approach, so that we can get through this acute phase of what we're dealing with now and get there as a society in the coming years so people can afford to live in Hawaii. So imagine that, $1 billion appropriation, because we had some savings, to help recover on Maui, and a $5 billion long-term plus play to help working families. And it's a bold thing to do, and we're going to be forever grateful for that.
So mahalo. At this time, I'd like to ask the governor to remain, and our speakers and key stakeholders, if you would like to join us on stage, I guess I can call this. We're going to gather for the bill signing.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. So, somewhat obvious, but I'll just read part here. In accordance with Section 9 of Article 7 of the Constitution of the State of Hawaii and Sections 3791 and 3793 Hawaii Revised Statutes, the legislature has determined that the general fund expenditure ceiling for fiscal year has already been exceeded by $1.033 billion, or 10%. And so they raised the ceiling and then offered us this extraordinarily important emergency appropriation of well over $300 million so that we can handle the recovery. So thank you, guys.
guys can go ahead and look this way, please.
Yeah, Mr. First, 3, 2, and 1. Speaker, can you show me details? Can't see you. Thank you.
And John, this formally concludes. Go ahead and keep looking this way, Minoaka. Alrighty. Good? Everybody good?
Before anyone asks, this blood is from donating blood with the speaker today. It was not from the conference committee.